Hello everyone and welcome to my video concerning the most recent VTM video game, Swansong, at least at the time of making this video. This was developed by Big Bad Wolf Studio and published by Nacon in May 2022. I played this on Xbox Series X, which is supposed to have a version that is optimised for the console, so let's see how this goes. The game starts up, and to summarise, vampires exist, the largest vampire sect is the Camarilla, and they enforce the Masquerade, which I've talked more about in my introductory video. This game pronounces Camarilla as Camarilla for some reason, perhaps it's an East Coast thing. Swansong takes place in Boston, Massachusetts in 2019, with the prince of the region being Hazel Iverson, who has recently secured a pact with the Tremere of the Hartford Chantry. This alliance would provide stability and give Hazel the blood trade, which is the trafficking of humans for the elite vampires of the area, so a celebration is organised. Then we hear cries from an unknown individual and see dead people, which we will soon find out are members of the Boston Camarilla. This event will never be referred to again. We see Laisha and Halsey getting ready to leave to go somewhere. I'll get to them in a moment. Then we see Caleb and Zufeng leaving to go somewhere. I'll get to them in a moment too. And we see and Journey in an elevator, also going somewhere. Now is a Toreador and one of the playable characters in this game, which means we get introduced to some key mechanics. The game doesn't really do a good job of explaining how this works in my opinion, so here's my version. We start off learning about dialogue skills, which are rhetoric, intimidation, persuasion and psychology. You need to have at least one bar invested to use a skill. I don't have any points in persuasion right now because the game just started, so I have to use the psychology option instead. This consumes willpower. It's represented as a meter at the top of the screen. What, you want a better answer? Sorry, but the game doesn't explain what this is, so this is as good as I can do. What the game does say is that you can gain willpower if your opponent wins a stage of the conversation. This interchange between and Journey was won, as Mm's psychology score was higher and I got rewarded with willpower, so who knows if that's right. A girl named April, who looks a little weird, comes to greet and Journey, which is where we get acquainted with disciplines and hunger. Disciplines are abilities that are unique to the different clans of VTM, so for example, Toreadors cannot use disciplines that a Nosferatu would use and vice versa. I didn't mention this in Redemption, as that game has a system where you can learn pretty much any discipline regardless of whether you should be able to or not. A Bruiser using Obfuscate? Perfectly fine, at least in Redemption. Don't expect to see any of that from here on out. As with skills, the higher score wins. Humans don't usually have any protection against disciplines, though there are exceptions. Maybe we will see some of that in this game? Hunger is generated when using a discipline which cannot exceed a maximum value of 12 points, otherwise the vampire will frenzy. That is, they lose control and attack and or feed on the nearest human. This doesn't really occur in this game, but I find it unique how Swansong handles this. In Redemption and Bloodlines, a blood meter determines how much blood a vampire has to be able to use disciplines, whereas Swansong does the opposite. Doesn't have high enough presence to beat April, so this is a lost battle. At this point we can move around slowly or quickly, and we pretty much switch perspectives immediately afterwards. This time we focus on Caleb and Zufeng. Caleb is a Ventrue and the second controllable character in Swansong, with Zufeng being his apprentice, a human awaiting the embrace. They have a talk, then we go back to having a heated argument with a Tremere called Dejan, which ends when Hilda, Mm's sire, shows up. Here we learn about focus. Skills can be focused, but knowledge, deduction and education, and disciplines cannot. For a skill to be focused, at least 1 point needs to be invested into that skill. The value of the skill's level can be focused as to temporarily increase the level of that skill up to 2 times, at the cost of increased willpower. If the result is a tie, A dice roll determines the victor, with a higher percentage of success improving the odds of winning the conversation. However, opponents can focus their skills too, but only by 1. This has an increased chance to occur if you focus your skills or use disciplines. In this case, lost the rhetoric battle, so we cannot learn if she knows anything about the code red. Oh yeah, the reason everyone's here is because of a code red, which is to say a disastrous event just happened. Nobody knows what happened, but we will find out soon. With that, meets the prince. We are then shown a bizarre vision of a hallway, which fades away before anything interesting happens. It turns out this is a premonition from Leisha, a Malkavian and the last playable character of Swansong. She's not as insane and nonsensical as Devnor from Redemption, but still crazy. I mean that too, as Malkavians have an incurable insanity that allows them to obtain insight into people's motivations, or to perceive events that haven't happened yet. She talks with her daughter Halsey, who is also a Malkavian, before and Caleb show up. This unites the trio of playable characters in Swansong who all speak with the prince. is up first, and we can choose where to invest experience points. New things to cover are the attributes, security and technology. Attributes affect specific skills and disciplines and can increase the odds of winning in the case of a tie, plus can reduce the willpower cost and chances of an opponent focusing their skills. Security regards the ability to pick locks, and technology concerns ability with electronics, which can allow devices to be hacked or for information to be acquired. I briefly mentioned deduction and education earlier. These involve the ability to make accurate inferences from at least one clue in the environment or from dialogue, and the breadth of knowledge about human and vampiric societies respectively. These cannot be focused and do not cost willpower to use. Everything I just mentioned, plus the rhetoric, intimidation, persuasion and psychology dialogue skills, all form the character sheet, which is the same for each playable character. Next up is the discipline sheet, which differs from character to character. Every discipline can be leveled up to a maximum of 5, with increasing levels unlocking new possibilities and reduces hunger consumption. has Auspex, Presence and Celerity disciplines at her disposal. Auspex heightens the 5 senses and allows you to detect scents, uncover the memories of an object, or to observe potential futures. Presence is the ability to influence the emotions of others. Celerity allows for fast movement and a slower perception of time. So back to the story, the prince wants to bring Journey to her. This is because the party I mentioned at the start was organised by Journey and something went horribly wrong, and now she's under investigation. What the fuck just happened to Hazel's face? Let's get out of here ASAP. We then get acquainted with feeding, which is the process of drinking blood from a human to reduce hunger. However, in order to do this, a safe zone must be found first, and even then, only one human can be sent to a given safe zone. When feeding starts, you have a choice of how much blood to consume. If you drink all of a mortal's blood, they die, which increases suspicion. Humans will be more alert, while vampires will question your respect for the Masquerade, so try not to kill the humans. You can feed on a human for a second time if you didn't kill them while feeding for the first time. However, they will die for sure if you do this, which increases suspicion. Here, there's 2 safe zones, so we can only feed twice. Some humans have emotionally charged blood, which earns a resonance bonus. Only the most recent resonance bonus applies, which leads to bonus experience for a specific discipline at the end of the scene. Okay, now to find Journey. One thing I have to say about Swansong is that it plays like a detective game. You have to carefully read text, find clues in the environment and piece them together to figure out what action to take. It's like it requires you to do 2 + 2 = 4, even though I'm more happy playing games where the 4 is given to you. In addition, the story tries to convey an actions have consequences message, so certain choices can affect what happens in later scenes. There's also a lot of text to read. A lot. This is mostly lore concerning the VTM universe and the situation in Boston, so if that interests you, feel free to check it out. I like the views in this game, especially when you get to see vehicles driving around. It adds a sense of depth to the world. So we track down Journey to Jara Drury's room, keep that name in mind, which introduces us to a point of no return, which is self-explanatory. We engage in a discussion with Journey and decide her fate, whether or not she should go to the Prince. If you choose to try and convince her to leave, you will have to win a confrontation which isn't worth it, believe me. As I believe Journey is innocent, I tell her to go to the Prince, which ends this segment. Next up is Leisha, who has Auspex, Obfuscate and Dominate disciplines. Obfuscate allows for invisibility and the application of disguises. Dominate regards the ability to command others and turn them into puppets. So the Prince and Leisha talk, with Leisha being tasked with seeing if any members of the Primogen are disloyal. This takes us to Jara Drury's room and in comes a mem. Yeah, crossover time. You can make Leisha give into a premonition or reject it and listen to MM and Journey's conversation. After this we can investigate the living spaces of the Primogen and return to the Prince. She now wants us to go to the scene of the crime, to go to the party and see what the hell happened. That ends this segment and we see MM again, albeit very briefly. Last but not least is Galeb, who has Fortitude, Presence and Dominate disciplines, plus something called Sense the Unseen. Fortitude regards physical and mental supernatural resilience, while Sense the Unseen is a cheap way of giving Galeb Auspex when he isn't supposed to have it. This cannot be levelled up. The Prince asks Galeb to talk with the new head of security, Caius, who gets a call which suggests that the party was attacked. Then the Prince calls a meeting with everyone and organises a plan of action. She asks Galeb to bring a guy named Jason Moore back to her, who is a human which manages the Camarilla's finances and hides their human trafficking operations. MM is tasked with going to the home of the Hartford Chantry, Jefferson Library, and try to reassure them that the Camarilla was not responsible for the attack on the party. With that, the first scene is done and dusted. I could have gone into more detail for Leisha's and Galeb's segments, but there's not that much to say about them and the same goes for the rest of the game. In addition, I feel I would be spoiling dialogue options and solutions to puzzles, which I don't want to do, which means I'll be skipping over a lot of gameplay I recorded. I hope this decision will inspire people to look into this game for themselves after watching this video, even though I'll be going over the main story beats. The story started off linearly, but now we have a choice of who to play as. We have to play with each character before progressing to the next chapter of the story, so it doesn't matter what order you go in. I'll start with MM. It doesn't start well. She's feeling hazy and confused, then thrown into a jail cell. Then we're greeted by... yeah, this isn't Massachusetts. I'll get to what this place is in a minute. You learn that MM can feed from rats to recover blood, even though this raises suspicion, and get a taster for how celerity in this game works. Then there's a flashback of sorts, which shows MM getting to Jefferson Library only to be attacked. Okay, it's time to bitch. It was this scene where I decided to say fuck it and look up a guide to see where to go and what to do, because I found myself wandering up and down this tunnel for about an hour without managing to do anything. And this ties back to what I said before about this game requiring you to do 2 + 2 = 4. Keep in mind, I played Leisha's and Galeb's sections before this on my first playthrough. You see, you can find and acquire items in this game, which you can use to increase willpower, decrease hunger, or temporarily increase other stats. As it turns out, a Tremere concoction is on this table, which is totally missable. This comes immediately after a prompt telling you about how celerity can be used to slow down time even more with fleetness. So what do you have to do? Drink the concoction that grants you fleetness for the scene to be able to get to the other side of these gates. And what does this get you? Some of MM's memories. Yeah, it's not even fundamental for beating the scene. This is if you want to become the Flash and understand MM better, get extra dialogue options later, or to complete a secondary objective which grants extra experience so you can better level up MM's abilities. What you have to do to beat this scene is to proceed towards the central tower and figure out the correct alignment of grooves from the pedestal you're standing on to the centre. Do this 3 times and you can escape. There's another puzzle to solve too, which is to align the grooves with a pattern that shows up on the pedestal for each level. This allows you to meet a prisoner, but this isn't worth it, trust me. So we escape and engage in a confrontation with the Tremere, which can end in either success or failure. Confrontations have various stages and you have to try and win each stage to win the argument, or fail a given number of times to lose. They tell us that we were in a memory prison and it's lucky we got out in one piece. Then the scene ends and we can review what we succeeded with, failed at, and what could have been done. Next up, how about Leisha's scene, so we can actually figure out what's going on. We get familiar with using Obfuscate, then see a real shit show. The party went tits up and there's blood everywhere. Then Halsey comes up with riddles to solve, which upon a successful answer reduces the hunger you would have just obtained. Then it's a matter of piecing together what happened and trying to find Richard, Leisha's psychiatrist, and Hazel's child, Miley. Finding Richard comes first, which comes with a confrontation. If you win, he gives you a concoction that temporarily grants you the doppelganger ability, which is useful for getting an alternate end to this scene. Let's just say it involves figuring out who we're dealing with. In fact, we can find a little info near the start. By piercing the Obfuscate at this location, we can find Richard's servant and a soldier from the SAD. Now we just have to figure out which container Miley is in and wheel it away to end the scene. One thing I haven't mentioned yet are suspicious items, which threaten the Masquerade, so finding and removing them from the scenes is ideal. Finding all the Masquerade violating items gives extra experience, so this is beneficial to do. Moving on, the only thing left to do now is Caleb's scene. He impersonates this poor FBI agent and it seems as if Jason Moore is dead, which isn't too good for us. We can talk to the caretaker to find out more. Our task is to find incriminating documents about the Primogen, which are suspicious items that would be better off not in the hands of mortals, so we have to do some puzzle solving to obtain them all. There's a ghoul disguised as a police officer that we can talk to and a thin blood named Wyatt in the parking garage that's hiding something. We can determine this by using Sense the Unseen, which identifies a creature's true nature. By convincing Wyatt to unlock the garbage holds, we can find a head, but it's not Jason's, so he's still alive somewhere. By piecing together evidence in the apartment, we can reveal a secret room where we find Jason dying. He gives his side of the story about the party and the state of the apartment, then drinks some of Caleb's blood to be strong enough to escape and evade the police. One thing to note is that you want to have little hunger before going to Jason, as you're going to need to use Caleb's disciplines to effectively manoeuvre around the cops. I didn't ensure this and ended up making a choice that ended up killing Jason, so I failed that part of the mission. Everything else went well, so I guess it's not all bad. With everything done, we return to the prince and determine what to do next. First off is Caleb, who has a choice to either help Caius with an urgent issue or to confront Beryl Underwood about Su Feng. Beryl is an asshole, to put it bluntly, and a child of Caleb, and he's expressing an interest in Feng. If you confront Beryl, you won't be able to help Caius and vice versa. So if you choose to see Beryl, you have to win a confrontation to prevent him from seeing Feng behind your back. Caius wants you to investigate Jara Drury's quarters, as he believes she was involved with the shit show at the party. Whatever you decide and however it turns out, you then speak with the prince. She believes that someone on the inside is being traitorous, but that's not our mission. We are tasked with heading to the base of operations for the attackers of the party, the SAD and the Second Inquisition. These are vampire hunters associated with the Society of Leopold, so taking them out would be useful for everyone. However, to get to their base, Caleb would have to pretend to be dead. I'll get to this detail a little later. MM's up next and is tasked with infiltrating the SAD base and wiping the data they have regarding them. However, this won't be easy to do alone, so she is allowed to go to the Anarchs and try to convince them to help by setting up a diversion and lying to them about Camarilla aid. After this, Hilda shows up and we leave with her to discuss what memories we recovered from the Tremere memory prison and the plan to meet the Anarchs. Then we have a choice: leave right away to see the Anarchs or to investigate Hazel's private quarters. Trespassing in the Prince's quarters offers some information about the Primogen, plus the order to execute Halsey. More of that is coming in a later scene. Leisha is up next, who has another vision of the hallway we would have saw earlier, who talks with Richard. He drops this bombshell.
Leisha, Halsey isn't real.
Yeah, according to him, Halsey is a figment of Leisha's imagination, and the document in the Prince's quarters suggesting that Halsey was executed supports this. Then we conversate with the Prince, where we can tell her she's going to die as foretold by Halsey, then a decision: take the drink Richard gave us to suppress Halsey, or reject the treatment which allows Halsey to stay. Regardless, another hallucination ensues. This time, we reach the door at the end of the hallway we've seen previously and see Halsey with clones of Leisha in a padded room. This isn't going to crop up later or anything. With that behind us, we can leave for the next set of scenes. I'll start with Leisha's scene. She heads to a red salon in hopes of finding Richard so he can explain what's happening to her. Of course, this is the same red salon that we would have heard about earlier from a police officer, so it's likely some action is heading our way. We see Beryl here for some reason, then it's down to business: finding Richard and disposing of Masquerade violating items. There's a human you need to get out of a barricaded room and crates with addresses on that need to have their labels removed. Trying to convince Wyatt, yeah, he's here, to see Beryl is a losing battle whatever you do, so we have to see him. You can try convincing Beryl that you are helpful and... oh god, it's happening again. How the hell is this happening? I can't take this seriously when this happens, my days. On the other side of the door is... a vampire chained up. You can either kill it or leave it be. As it turns out, this is the former Prince of Boston, Quentin King, who vanished under mysterious circumstances at around the time Hazel came to power. Hilda had him locked up in this basement as punishment for what he did to her, which was to punish her for MM's actions. To be exact, it's this memory from the Tremere prison. MM killed someone who tortured her via a blood bond, which is another one of her memory fragments, which violates the 6th tradition. The blood bond is an event where someone drinks a vampire's blood and becomes subservient to them, like Lily in Redemption. King ordered Hilda to be punished for this in accordance to the 4th tradition, and it seems she held a grudge for a long time. Beryl tells us about this, but only if we kill King. Continuing on, we find Richard's offices, but he seems to be absent. We obtain documents concerning test subjects, with an interesting one being about Juliet. Keep that in mind. After some puzzle solving, we enter a secret room when the SAD strike. There's an easily missable document about someone called Marie. Keep that in mind also, when we see the hallway from earlier. At the end lies a door, and on the other side of the door lies Halsey, who apparently just fed. She runs off and we follow, only to see this.
Wait! Halsey!
As if that wasn't bad enough, we argue with ourselves. We can actually learn a lot about Leisha here. It turns out, Leisha is Marie and Halsey is Juliet. They fled from France to Boston in 1939 to escape the Nazis, that Richard had to sire Juliet to save her from typhus and she killed Marie. Richard forced Marie to drink Juliet's blood, meaning Marie's own daughter is her sire. Yeah, that's a strange situation, and I can't help but think back to this riddle from the party.
Riddle me this. If the child of Hazel Iverson is the sire of my child, Who am I to Hazel Iverson?
Perhaps Halsey or Juliet knows about this? With this confrontation out of the way, we try to escape. There's soldiers mourning over one of their own sacrificing themselves to save them, plus Richard escapes on a boat, using obfuscate obviously, with Halsey in a container. Then we have two options. Walk straight to the guard and get captured, or solve this pressure puzzle to stun one of the soldiers, distracting the guard and allowing for our escape. How would no one notice her leaving? Also, how would Leisha know where to go? Maybe she uses her Malkavian insight or something. Either way, the scene ends. Next up, how about Caleb? He manages to get into the SAD base, but is in the morgue. How did he pull off the stopping of his vital functions for this to work? Well, however he did it, he's stuck in this area. The only way to leave is to get an implant, then scan the door by using Blush of Life. This temporarily pumps blood through the body to make the implant function as intended. Remember, vampires are technically dead. A receptionist arrives and questions Caleb, so you can choose how to handle the situation. One thing to note, grab the scalpel. It may come in use later. Down we go into the depths of the facility. Remember this area for later too. A SAD guard stops Caleb and using disciplines on him doesn't work, so a different approach is needed. This will get an explanation later as well. This part. Yeah, I remember encountering a bug here a few times where you wouldn't be able to look up or down as the game believed you were interacting with this screen here. If you didn't get the angle of the dangle right, you had no way to activate the screen to fix this, so you had to quit and re-enter the scene. I didn't experience this issue this time around, perhaps the devs fixed it. So we have to find the leader, Walter Stanford, who we could have met earlier back at the party with Leisha. He's somewhere in the facility, but we don't know where. We need a higher class implant from one of 3 people to determine where to go. This takes us to either the treasure, pyre or clinic sectors. We can learn all sorts of things from visiting each of the sectors, but let's focus on the clinic. We find out that Jara Drury is definitely dead. Then we collect an implant and install it. Keep in mind, Caleb has to use Blush of Life to make the implant work, which is essential for his mission. With a red implant installed, we can go back to the screen I mentioned earlier and find Stanford. Except he gets a stake through the heart which renders him unconscious. When he comes to, he gets interrogated by Stanford and we have to choose how much information we reveal about Caleb and the Camarilla. The interrogation ends with the arrival of a more interesting vampire, most likely Halsey. Last but not least, it's Mem's turn. She has a meeting with the Anarch Baron, Randall Fane, who refuses to help. So our objective now is to try and convince the gang leaders, Ceres and Rafa, to help us out. We get to see the conditions that the Anarchs reside in, which looks awful when juxtaposed against the Camarilla. I went to Rafa first as there's a couple of different approaches you can take to get to him. Winning him over is critical for something I will cover later. There's information to learn about the Anarchs and Rafa here, plus you need to win a confrontation with him to get him on board. Next up is Ceres, who rejects us instantly. Then somebody by the name of Yardley wants to talk to us, who has a plan to frame Ceres so he can help instead. You can choose to side with him or rat him out to Ceres. I did the latter. After the confrontation with Ceres, we go to MM's friend Saul and finally speak with Fane. In my case, there's a choice to either go at it solo or drag the Anarchs into assaulting the SAD base. Again, we have to bring the Anarchs along with us to gain information about the traitor. Fane doesn't seem too pleased that we used his closest allies against him, then tells us to leave, ending the scene. So we're in the endgame now, and unfortunately we don't have a choice about who we play as, so it goes back to a more linear yet disjointed style. In addition, the scenes become much shorter in comparison to the earlier ones. Leisha is first up, who managed to reach the SAD base and is trying to find Halsey. The starting point is determined by how Leisha ended the Red Salon scene. If you allowed her to be captured, her starting point would be here. I moved this crate out of the way for later. This is why I wanted Leisha to escape the SAD, not be captured by them. We disguise ourselves as one of the baddies and enter the base. As you may be able to tell, these guys were very organised and thorough with their strike against the Kindred, which is why it's imperative to take them out. We can find Richard here, who is busy killing Agent Olsen, a guy we could have spoken to at the party. He tries to explain everything, that he couldn't kill Halsey even though the prince ordered it, and convinced everyone that Halsey was all in Leisha's head. We can kill him or let him go, do whatever you want. When you find where Halsey is, we can leave. MM's next with her arrival at the base, overlooking the area we would have saw with Caleb and possibly Leisha. With the crate moved, we can listen in on a conversation that suggests that their informant was captured. We crawl through the vents, seeing the SAD and Anarchs moving around from under us, and take out a guard and try to hack their system. This doesn't work, then this guy comes in and we deal with him. Now you want to head down this way and past this fan, that way we can obtain another clue, the informant has a code name. We drop down here, only to hear the Anarchs die, but the show must go on. It's Caleb's turn to unleash the inner matrix and kill every soldier in this torture chamber, then find a way to escape alive. We can extract information from an agent, then kill her. Damn, Caleb's on a killing spree. We can find out that the SAD soldiers use voice blockers in their helmets to ignore vampiric voices, which is why Caleb's disciplines didn't work earlier. There's actually 3 ways to beat this mission: freeing the werewolf, convincing a Malkavian by the name of Michelle to help, or have high enough fortitude to eliminate one guard. I think the last option is only available if you successfully convince the Anarchs to help, then send them off to their demise. This requires a fortitude of at least 4 out of 5 to initiate. Convincing Michelle requires a dominate of at least 3, plus the scalpel I mentioned earlier. If you don't have it, then the werewolf is the last choice. You have to learn about it, then talk to him to arrange a temporary agreement. This complicates things for later, so I'll side with Michelle for now. When she has everything she needs, she renders us unconscious, and when we come to, she is long gone, putting us at the end of the segment. One thing to note is that Beryl is here as well, and you can decide whether he stays imprisoned or released. If you didn't win or choose the confrontation with him earlier, he embraces Zhu Feng behind Caleb's back, so I think leaving him behind is the right choice in that case. We return to MM, where she has to eliminate either 1 or more SAD guards and an agent on a computer by using the vent controls to lure them. If you make a bad choice, you will lose access to the lower levels, so have to ride on top of the elevator to get to the server room. Anyway, we take everyone out and find more information about the traitor, such as their code name being Corvus. We can ask Rotha for help in hacking an email, then provide him with the necessary details. He shortly gets back to us and we find out that Jara Drury was the informant. However, she wasn't working alone, meaning there's another traitor. We know Jara's already dead at this point, so figuring out who the other Corvus is of significant importance. When ready, leave for the server room via the elevator. Rotha catches on to the reality of the situation, that the Anarchs had been killed, and abruptly ends communication with us. Caleb's next with his visit to Stanford's office. Of course, he isn't here, but we can find vital information and even clone Stanford's implant. If you convinced Joseph in the treasure section from earlier to help, and you didn't sell him out to Stanford during the interrogation, he's here looking for stuff. Anyway, I went down the route of cloning Stanford's implant and found out he's the linchpin of the whole operation in Boston, plus where he is located currently. You could also obtain this intel from a girl named Paula who Stanford was helping. With that info in hand, away we go. We're in the home stretch now. Let's start with MM's last mission. She Falcon punches this guard and enters the server room. The only difference to this is if you found and released the prisoner from the Tremere prison, then he will show up here and you have to win a confrontation with him, otherwise MM dies. Yeah, it's getting serious now. So you expose the servers and consult the central computer. We need to figure out what the administrator password is, plus the identity of the other traitor. With all the information I found earlier, it's easy enough to find Jara's interrogation. She reveals this.
Hilda McAndrews!
That's right, Hilda McAndrews, MM's sire, was the traitor. Armed with this, we compromise the SAD's systems and escape. If you take too long, the SAD breach the server room and kill MM. Leisha's next with her mission to rescue Halsey. There's this gruesome scene with a soldier committing suicide seemingly against his will. The task is to free Halsey from an incineration chamber and convince her you have a bond, which requires making the right dialogue choices. Or you can just stand there and not do anything, your call. Whatever choices you make, this will end with either Halsey dying, leaving without you, or fleeing with you. And that's Leisha's missions done. Okay, I admit I forgot something. There was a Leisha mission earlier that I omitted. This is only encountered if you trigger the escape sequence with the werewolf in a prior Caleb section. So let's cover it. Leisha arrives in a warehouse and finds the path she needs to take is sealed shut and the door override is on the other side of a window. We move through into the warehouse, but whoa! The werewolf is here. And what's this? My obfuscate discipline has been taken away from me. Why? To make it so I can't hide from the werewolf, that's why. If he catches you, it's an instant 6 increase to the hunger meter, so you're only allowed to fuck up 2 times. Otherwise, Leisha dies. So this is finally like a game. Kinda. We have to move from safe place to safe place and avoid the werewolf at all costs. If you're good enough, you escape. So yeah, the one time this game had actual gameplay and it was this. Let's finish this at this point, Caleb's standoff against Stanford. You can find the people you killed in the initial infiltration here, then you have to shatter Stanford's will to survive. If you win, Stanford is killed, and if Richard was spared, he shows up and disguises himself as Stanford as we leave. Otherwise, Caleb is destroyed. After this, we have introductory scenes with Caleb and MM. With Caleb, you choose how to deal with Zhu Feng depending on the situation that happened with her earlier. With MM, you can confront Hilda about her traitorous actions or grass her up to the prince immediately. If you choose to confront her, she mentions her reasons as to why she did what she did. Apparently, the British Camarilla are on the way and the Boston Camarilla won't survive. Plus she had to pledge eternal allegiance to them after they escaped France, which was from MM's memories. You need a celerity of 4 to survive, if not, Hilda kills MM. The opposite occurs with high enough celerity. So with that, the prince offers her final thoughts and the game is over. If you screwed something up earlier, you get messages telling you of the consequences, such as not finding Jason Moore, not finding out who the traitor was, and if you went along with Yardley's plan. I know there's a boatload of alternate possibilities that I didn't talk about, but this video would go on forever if I focused on every single interaction in this game and how it affects the story. There's also Leisha's endings, if she survived, where she's either imprisoned in the SAD base, imprisoned at the Vatican, or leaving with Halsey at the Vatican. Who knows why she ends up at the Vatican? Conclusion time. Oh dear. To be honest, I like what's in Swansong. There's characters, story, motivation, lore, and great looking visuals at times. However, the gameplay is severely lacking and makes this, as much as I hate to say this, the worst VTM game I will be covering. Yeah, that's because there wasn't really any gameplay throughout the game. I guess the werewolf section counts, which technically classifies this as a game, hence why I chose to cover it. That's a shame, but that's the way it is. If only the game had flashback sequences or an alternate storyline where we get to see the game play out from the SAD's perspective, like the way Halo 2 switches between the Master Chief and the Arbiter, I can imagine what the werewolf hunting scene could have been like. Alas, that is not what this game is. This is good if you like to solve puzzles and play detective, which isn't what I had in mind when getting this. I wanted this to be more like Bloodlines. Potentially, this could have been an appetizer for Bloodlines 2, since the graphical fidelity is here along with a story that conveys consequence. However, I think Bloodlines remains the tastiest appetizer for Bloodlines 2. Following on from my Redemption video, where that game had Generation 9 and 10 vampires, Swansong has Generation 10 and 12 vampires. Keep in mind, Redemption started in 1141, Swansong takes place in 2019. You mean to tell me that a couple of generations of vampires lived for hundreds of years without being destroyed or entered torpor? Personally, I find that a little hard to believe. Although, technology back then was nothing like it is today, so maybe that would have something to do with it. Ultimately, I think the execution of this game was subpar. It could have been so much more, and the potential was wasted. I feel as if this game started off as a Sherlock Holmes detective investigation style game, before someone had the great idea of slapping the VTM brand over it. Then chucked in a half-baked skill and progression system, and you get the picture. So the worst VTM video game, but not a bad game. Just a different experience than what you might expect from a video game, especially from the VTM universe. So if I just covered the worst, how about I move on to the best? I think we all know what's coming for Halloween. All I can say is I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider buying me a coffee to help support this channel, and subscribe so you won't miss the final installment of this Halloween special for 2022, which will be about Bloodlines. See you for that, and stay spooky.